Ola, how are you?
Hi, John. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Hey, I'm playing around with a new feature. I just can't help but talk about it for 10 seconds.
Okay.
It's polishing up my face. Do you think I look a little nicer?
You look like maybe you've added a little bit of maybe makeup to your face, so it's doing
Yeah,
that for you electronically, is it?
it's electronic. It's absolutely incredible. I mean, this
You
is
know, as soon as we get off, the first thing I'm going to go do is go find it and play with it. So,
well, that brings us to our topic, Ola, is it's really about when we talk about tech and all this great work that we do in sourcing and advisory and everything else, it's all related to software, right? You can't do a lot without tech and software. So today we've got a great guest, Mark Smith, who just joined us. He was the CEO of Ventana Research, and we acquired his firm at the end of last year, and we're super excited to have him on board. So let's bring on Mark.
hi,
Mark,
Mark.
how are you?
How do I look, John?
You
I put some makeup on just for you, John.
Good, good. You look a little smoother. It's nice, very nice. So welcome to the show and welcome to ISG. It's been 4 or 5 months now, and not even 3 or 4 months, I should say. And would love to know a little bit more about, first of all, what made you come to ISG? What made you join ISG?
Yeah, thanks, John. Who's counting? It's day 85, but it's been a blast and really been an exciting.
All right, so
Uh-oh.
there's our tech working full effect there.
That's right, John. Isn't that true? It always works that way. Suddenly we have an interruption.
Well, we may have to just utilize hopefully his voice, and maybe he can turn off his camera
Yeah.
for bandwidth.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're all at that stage where we're so reliant upon our networks and our bandwidth.
Yeah.
I think I live here in London. London's always a bit of a stretch. As I say to people, I'm vying with 11 million other people for bandwidth in the middle of where I live. So I can sort of understand why occasionally we have difficulties. The funny part is at 5 p.m. London time, it's crazy. There's no bandwidth. All I can assume is that kids are home from school, people are back from work and they're all turning on their streaming services.
I was
So
going to say,
that
is
may
that
be what's
like a
happening.
network, a Netflix effect or what?
I guess so. I guess that's kind of what happens, in this new world of technology.
Hey, so
But
while we're waiting for Mark to come on, let's talk a little bit, Ola. When you think about 2024 and software, and some of the things that we're seeing, and we're going to be talking about trends for 24 coming up. But what are your thoughts on like how software is going to be more and more integrated into how we think about sourcing and the work that providers do?
well, I think there's two things that are really going to drive software. One is, well, it's a heck of a lot easier to make.
Yeah,
We've got so many tools and capabilities now that make it much easier for product companies to be able to give us really expansive products, which means that software products in the industry have really exploded. Um, Used to be, one or maybe two or maybe three tools that did full functioning HR, let's just
yeah,
say. There's a ton of tools out there,
yeah,
right? And they're getting cheaper. It's easier to disrupt in the market for the software product, for the software product companies. So we see a proliferation. So you got a
yeah,
whole lot of different software products out there, but you've also got this move with organizations to simplify, and particularly if they have a need in a particular business area to quickly enable the best practices. One of the easiest ways to do that is to go out in the marketplace, go to the experts who know how to run HR with technology, and get the latest, greatest HR technology, capability enabler. So
yeah,
those software products very often are enablers for our enterprise clients. So those two things, I think, proliferation, there's a ton of it out there. It's getting cheaper.
yeah,
It's easier to integrate in our environments because those software product, companies are much smarter about making them integratable. And then just the need for most enterprise organizations to really be able to um, integrate them into their practice. They're getting really used to how to do that. Take software, pull it into their practice and use it to enable the latest, greatest way of doing that business process.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a point too, is with the integration and the ease of it, it really a lot of that's related to where we've come with the cloud, right? So as now we're able to actually have those tools in the cloud. I mean, I remember, right? I mean, this is not going back that far. I'm old, but not that old. I mean, you'd get a CD, right? I mean,
Yes.
yeah. So, think about Best Buy. I think it was this last month was the last month they were going to sell CDs of movies, right? DVDs.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it wasn't long before that, maybe 15, 18 years, that you got a CD to install software. Now today it's a download, it's an app, it's you're up and running, right?
And think about the enterprise clients who are needing capabilities and understanding from a research perspective. And this is where I think Mark can help us a lot in understanding, boy, this has got to be a really big area for research because of the proliferation of software products in the environment, because of the need of enterprises to be able to lean in and grab those products and use them in their own practices and their own businesses. They need a trusted source of being able to understand what are the best software products and what are the capabilities of those software products versus their competitive product in the marketplace. So hopefully we can bring Mark back in, and hopefully he can tell us a little bit about Ventana and how they can help enterprises and others in that space. Hey, Mark.
Mark, how you doing? You still look a bit confused there, young man.
Can you
He
guys
may
hear
not
me
be able to
okay?
hear us.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I don't think he can
Excellent.
hear us.
All right. And Ola, one other thing too, and Mark will get into the details, and I don't want to get the number wrong, so Mark can tell us the number. But I think it's about 2,000 software providers that Mark and the team at Ventana Research are keeping track of. And when I think about software, I'm like, okay, there's Microsoft, there's some Google tools, there's Salesforce, there's Zoho, right? There's Workday, there's like 10 of them, right? No, there's over 2,000. It's like you said,
Yeah.
it's huge, right?
And there's such a different landscape of software. When you think of software, there are platforms that we all think of that are, I'll call them, the big, large players in your environment that are really the core of your business. And those cores of your business are things like your SAPs, your Oracles, your Microsofts,
Yeah.
that are ubiquitous across a lot of different enterprises and are really, core of your business in one way, shape, or form. But there's also a lot of software products that are core to pieces of your business, your HR systems, your finance systems. If you're in supply chain, your supply chain systems, your ordering systems, your AR system, all of these different software capabilities are really, again, enablers of your business processes that you do. And because it's easy to create and the proliferation is starting to dig into industry solutions. So we have very specific industry solutions. I mean, think about a hospital. I'll just make this up, right?
Yeah.
Think about a hospital. A hospital has to have software in order to figure out, where do I put my patients? How many beds do I have? When's the next time that the nurses need to go on their rounds? It's a very unique business environment, but it's not unique to each individual hospital. It's unique to that industry. So that industry has a need. And would have been not that long ago where a lot of hospitals would have created their own bespoke solutions, right, to go across their capabilities, simply because it was expensive to create. It took a long time to create those solutions. And by the way, once you had the solution, you were kind of married to it for a long time because it took a long time and was really expensive. Part of what we've seen in this age of software, rapid software development, and my ability to have products that are actually created and have a large tenant to them. So lots of tenancies, lots of hospitals are using it, which means that software product company has lots of investment they can do and lots of users who are telling them, giving them great ideas about how to make those investments. And for the hospitals, that software product is just getting better and better and better over time. But they're also not married to it. They can also go out in the marketplace every now and then and say, is there something new, something out there I should be looking at? So it's also a little easier, I think, to disrupt. And that's why I think that proliferation of software and the need with organizations to simplify and not to have to create their own bespoke solutions for everything, and wanting to go out and say, what is the latest, greatest way for me to be able to, I don't know, design an automobile? Do I need to go and create my own software to allow me to do that? Or are there products out in the marketplace? And I think both in the scope of the software, the types of software products that we're seeing hit in the market, and the number of them, between those two things, it's like an explosion. Boom.
Yeah.
Lots of them. So I'm sure part of what Mark, probably his organization, I'm sure, has to struggle with is, where do I lean in? Like, if I did this against every software product, that'd be a lot more than 2,000, I'm going to guess.
Yeah.
So the core ones, I think, are going to be critical for him.
I think it's the core ones, and it's also understanding, how much you want to do through a software solution, and then how much you want to create as a differentiator, right? So there's a balancing act. I remember it was a large beverage company based in Atlanta, and we were in there presenting a tech solution for them around analytics. And the executive team absolutely loved it. And then the CIO said, well, I've got engineers here, and we could craft this on our own. I was like, you bring up a good point. I said, Mark and I, and the engineer I was with me. I said, Mark and I, we started making soda in our basement a few months ago, and then we realized, why don't we stick to what we know best, and why don't we focus on, and let them focus on the soda. And everybody in the room laughed except for the CIO. But they bought the tech because, to the point of Ola, it's like, you should think about this happy balance. It's probably, you don't want to buy everything off of a quote unquote shelf, but there's some practicality to knowing, in Salesforce or Zoho, that there's 8 million people every minute giving feedback to Salesforce to make the tool better for everyone, rather than your 1,500 employees maybe making it better over time for yourself, right? There's a balance, right?
Yeah. And I think we also need to recognize, and particularly in these, I'll call it temperate, economic climate, we don't just have a lot of money for discretionary spend. And it really is generally and usually less expensive to have a software product that's brought in, right? Rather than me trying to develop it on my own, because it's not just the development, John, it's the ongoing improvement and ongoing changes that need to happen. So HR is, I always use as an example. In fact, I often say the HR departments usually don't like me very much when I talk about architecture and about sourcing with their enterprises, because generally the way I do HR in any organization is really similar to the way the guy across the street does HR. I may have some differences in terms of legal requirements based on where I am or where I have employees. I may have some differences in how I recruit. I may have some differences in, the particulars of how I do maybe performance management. So there's some external areas where I may have some real differences based on the industry. But by and large, I want to recruit, hire, develop, take care of, pay, and eventually retire my employees. That cycle is really similar. And so the need for me to go out and spend money, time, and effort, and particularly when it's, discretionary money is hard to come by often. I'd rather spend my resources and my skill and my capabilities in development on the things that are unique to me, not the things that are standard and the same as the other guy. Let me go buy something off the shelf to do that. To your point, I should be spending my discretionary spend should be spent, and my development spend should be spent on my unique differentiators, or the things that I do that are very unique to me as an enterprise firm.
Yeah, and Ola, think about we're coming up on a problem in the marketplace, in the industry, especially in retail CPG, that I don't think people are paying enough attention to. The urgency is, you've got all this SAP work that's been done, and that was an 8-10 year implementation, right? And now they're moving to S/4HANA. I think that it's 2027 maybe is the date. I don't want to get it wrong, but I think it's 2027. My point being is I can envision this now. I'm going to be a futurist. 6 weeks, 6 months before that date, where all of support goes away, and you'll have to use a third-party support. everybody's going to rush to service providers. Okay. And I was with Genpact this past week with their executive team talking about this. And I'm like, look, you should be encouraging and coaching your teams and have them talk with ISGs. Don't wait till 6 months before. Get this work done now and be done with it. So while your competition is struggling to figure that out, you're already moving on to the next exciting thing. What are your thoughts on this, Ola? Everybody waits to the end, right?
John, I'm just going to take you back not that long ago to Y2K,
Yeah.
right? Oh, Y2K. Oh, my goodness. You know, there is something to be said for generating a little bit of fear in the marketplace to get people to act quickly enough so that when that, you know, that deadline approaches, we're not in a position of not being able to respond appropriately. So I think making sure that everyone is aware of that timing. And I think most organizations very much are. I think the uniqueness about SAP is that it is so much at the core of many organizations because it's their financials, typically that at the very least that are sitting within that software package. So if you're sitting there and you've got SAP, it's probably entangled with a lot of other things. Over time, you've kind of entangled it. Now, one of the great things about, you know, the HANA environment is that my entanglement's not so deeply connected. It's kind of easier to disconnect it or connect it. So I have a little bit of a need, but the older versions of SAP are probably relatively entangled in the environment. So this is not an unplug it one day and plug in the next day. And as long as, and I think SAP is doing a relatively good job, and as our service providers are making sure that they're keeping that front and center in front of their clients who are in those older SAP versions. But yeah, it's gonna be very terrifying for companies who aren't approaching it quickly enough to be able to do something about it. And we probably still will have a rush toward the end. We had that with Y2K, right? We did have a rush kind of toward the end. To your point, 6 points and 6 months before, a little bit of panic ensued. But I think a lot of organizations are seriously thinking about it, contemplating what is my step? When do I start? How do I start? What do I do? I think that's true of any software. It's the other thing I think that makes organizations much more willing to reach into that software product environment and pull in software products is that we've created architectures that now allow us to make those far more easy to plug into our environment. To your point about it being cloud-based, I no longer have to have people who know how to support it. I no longer have to have people who know how to install it. I don't need that same level of support and operational knowledge because a lot of it is now in the cloud. I have a connection, API layers that allow me to, all I have to know is how to deal with API layers and I'm kind of there. So I don't have to have unique knowledge to be able to use those software environments. Whereas with SAP, you kind of had to have some unique knowledge to be able to do that. So I think that landscape of how we architect our integration layers has changed, made that much easier for us to plug in and out of a particular software package. And that's all to the goodness, but it also causes just that much more proliferation, frankly.
Yeah, and Ola, it's interesting because look, it was a 10-year journey with SAP. Now it'll be 18 months to kind of get you to S/4HANA, but the speed at which it goes will be faster, to your point. It won't be that pain. The other thing I find interesting is, we were on this big kick 2 years ago of how fast we move everything and anything to the cloud, but it's not necessary with software. Because now, you think about going on a Delta airline flight. You probably are going to fly this week or next. I flew this week. There's an app, I'm using it. It's all up to date. It's tech, but it's going back, I guarantee you, to some server in some basement that's been on for 40 years straight, never turned off, and it's working perfectly. And it's okay. I don't care. I've got my phone, I've got my app, I've got the data I needed, and I don't care that it's in or out of the cloud. So, Ola, that's another exciting piece of technology is it's going to allow people to leave this great tech. I hate calling it legacy because it's the stability piece that's working fine. Why mess with it? And then use apps to kind of touch in and grab what you need. What are your thoughts on that?
That's just true. I think we're definitely seeing the much more of a recognition that we have things in our environments that are probably going to work fine the way they are for a while. Again, we have to make decisions. Where's our priority? Where do we go? Right. So, but I think that organizations are far more recognizing it's all about the risk that's in their environment. If it's older, let's call it older rather than maybe legacy or heritage. If it's heritage, it's really about the risk. It's a risk on both sides, right?
Yeah.
What's the risk if it suddenly fails? What does that mean? And then what's really the risk of me attempting to replace it because of the way that I had to integrate it? But let's see if we can get Mark back in and see what he's got to tell us about software landscape and what Ventana Research can do for us.
Well, I'm back, so that's a good thing, right?
That's great.
Well,
nice to have you back, Mark.
When the hardware fails and your entire machine just completely crashes, that's when software should take over the hardware world. So apologize for that.
No, it's quite all right.
It's one of those things, but you're absolutely right. People just want software to work. Where it's located, how it operates, picking up on your point, John, listen, how do I do it, cost effectively? How do I give the best possible experience? And, how do we get on mission for what we're trying to accomplish? So picking up on your points, I completely agree in, kind of where we're at with the different curves of excitement and then, kind of maybe a little bit of disappointment in regards to the promises of what some software can do or not do for the enterprise.
Hey, Mark, listen, and thanks for getting back here. I appreciate it. And I love the fireside chat. It just feels so good to have a fire going here. Listen, Mark, one of the things you've joined ISG, you've got this great firm. It's been around for 20 years. Tell us about how many software providers are you monitoring and looking at in research? And then how does that help a client? Because isn't it just like 5 softwares I should just pick from SAP, pick SAP or pick Salesforce and I'm done? I mean, why do I need all this data around software?
You're absolutely right. And I wish there was only 5 because I'd be retired sitting on the beach with a Mai Tai. So it's a very good point that the reality is that, the software economy is, over $800 billion annually. And we track over 2,500 software providers that just cover the business software, business applications, software for IT, technology infrastructure types of software. There's another 500 or 600 specialized vertical software application companies as well. It's a very diverse landscape, and the reality is there's economies around each of these. You mentioned SAP or Oracle or Salesforce. Listen, they'll never be able to deliver everything that a single enterprise needs. And so the question now is, how do you interconnect the software? These days, much more complicated than the past because some of it's still on premise, some of it's virtualized, some of it's in a private cloud, some of it's in a public cloud. So operating in an enterprise landscape is definitely challenging, and it requires keeping a pulse on all the software options available because there continues to be innovation every day coming out of the software landscape, which is frankly what keeps me going every single day is, what's new, what's changing, how does the world actually get to a point of being more streamlined in how they use computers and technology, but it's more of us as human beings interacting with the software.
Yeah, definitely.
What kind of changes, Mark, have you seen like in the last 5 years? I know you've been around for 20, but it feels like it's been far more rapid in the last, say, 5-7 years. Does it feel like that for you? I mean, how has it changed? What are the big changes you've seen?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. In the last 3 years, the pace, I would say coming into the pandemic, where many software providers just started to increase the pace in kind of their agile development and their sprints and their cycles to release new capabilities. Used to be we got one big annual release a year, maybe we do a couple of quarter releases. Now it's like big release every quarter, but every month we're actually adding more and more. So the changes are happening much more rapidly than frankly most enterprises can actually adapt to the change of all the innovations. And that's not just operating the cloud, it's just having much more streamlined applications and technologies that work the way humans work. How are the workflows in our enterprise? How do we work together as team? How do we collaborate more effectively? Of course, we all want better automation. We want more intelligence. Our systems need to be more personalized to who we are in our roles and responsibility. And you notice how I didn't, through that whole conversation, mention the word AI. But yes, AI in the box is absolutely important. It needs to be hidden. It needs to be, embedded. And in the last 3 years, every single software provider that's still standing, that's actually relevant, has put AI inside of their systems, and in some cases, revolutionary changes. And then obviously, we want our systems to be more human. We want to be able to converse. We want to be able to, type. So, the forms of NLP and generative AI, those paces of changes have happened much more rapidly to enterprise software because the consumer side of the world is driving lots of innovation that's required to be relevant in the millisecond kind of internet we operate in. And so the enterprise side has to get smarter in how they provide the tools to enterprises.
Hey, Mark, one of the things I love about Ventana Research is how much content that your team is creating for the marketplace to assist them in making better decisions. I mean, just alone on generative AI, and you mentioned it, so I'll mention it. I mean, you've written over 100 pieces, I think, correct? Your team on points of view, et cetera. I mean, this breadth of knowledge in the last minute or so here, how will enterprises, and also as importantly for us as service providers, both sides, how can they quickly benefit from working with Ventana Research, ISG, and that combination of what you're bringing to the table?
Yeah, no, great question. And listen, we have been busy to infuse all the great research and insights that we do at Ventana inside and part of ISG Research, which services the overall ISG around the planet. And now that's accessible to the service providers through their relationships with ISG, to be able to consume the research, to be able to talk to our subject matter experts. We launched a new AI software expertise led by David Menninger, who's our executive director of research. So we've got different dimensions that's inside of all the services from ISG. So and no matter how you're engaging with ISG, Ventana now is accessible through those relationships.
I love that. That's great.
That's excellent.
Any last thoughts before we take off? Ola, any thoughts? This is Mark. We enjoyed the 6.5 minutes that we had with you today.
You can have my computer. I'm gonna get a new one. Yeah, apologies on that. And if we can get rid of these computers and just be able to talk through microphones, much better planet will be on.
Probably true, Mark. We'll be sure and have you back so we can ask you all the questions that I've got burning in my brain. But thanks for getting back with us, and good luck with the computer there too.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ola, listen, I love our conversations. I mean, I'm so glad Mark joined us, but I think actually we gave our viewers something to think about in the 20 minutes that we've just riffed. So it was great chatting with you as always.
As always, John, look forward to our next chat.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.